The iPhone 12 may only be a few months old at this point, but of course the iPhone 13 is coming, and we're already seeing rumors and rumblings about what we can expect in the new phones. A higher refresh rate display, new cameras, or maybe even a new design? I'm Andrew Martinick with Digital Trends, and here's all of the things that I'm expecting in the iPhone 13 and what I hope Apple will do, but let's be honest, probably won't go with. Thanks for checking out this video, and if you're a fan, be sure to subscribe and mark that bell icon so that you get alerted every time that we put up a great new video on the channel. And really quickly, before we get going, I want to hear from you about what you want to see on the channel in my next video. Do you want to hear more about the Galaxy S21 series that I've been using? Maybe you want to hear about one of the new cheaper phones, like something from TCL that we haven't yet put on the channel. Let me know down in the comments below. Back when I reviewed the iPhone 12 series, many of you agreed with me that the iPhone 12 was the one to get because the 12 Pro just didn't offer that much more, even though it was so much more expensive. Apple's going to run into the same problems with the iPhone 13 series if it doesn't make considerable upgrades to the 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max. There's talk that the iPhone 13 Pro models will finally move to a high refresh rate display, and I think this one is basically a lock. Apple's been watching the rest of the industry go to 120 Hz and even uses 120 Hz on its own iPad Pro models. Now it's finally figured out how to use the same display technology that makers like Samsung have already used in their latest phones. It lets them go all the way up to 120 Hz but not hurt battery life, which is the big concern that Apple has because it has so much smaller batteries than the Android competition. But this is something it has to do, and I can't wait to see 120 Hz paired up with the amazing display technology that Apple has across the board elsewhere. And speaking of displays, how many of us just love the look of the notch at the top of our iPhones? None of us? Okay, good, because Apple is supposed to be fixing this finally. It's had the notch at the top of the display since the iPhone 10, and it's been the exact same size, and that's just crazy. Apple can finally figure out how to reduce the size of the notch, and it does so without removing Face ID. I love Face ID, and I think it's one of the greatest features that Apple's introduced to the iPhone, but that notch is bordering on absurd when so many other companies are making really small notches or little hole punches for their individual cameras. Now, their Face Unlock isn't as secure as Face ID, of course, but Apple can walk the line here and needs to bring that notch down in size. And speaking of security, you may have heard that Apple is releasing a new Face ID unlock that lets you use Face ID with a face covering on if you use an Apple Watch, but I use a Garmin, not an Apple Watch, and so that feature is not going to work for me. But the iPhone 13 is supposed to fix that. It's supposed to include a Touch ID sensor once again, but it's not going to be below the screen or on the side of the phone. It's probably going to be underneath the display. Android phones have been using in-display fingerprint sensors for a long time now, and they're really, really good. So if Apple can do Face ID and Touch ID at the same time, that's just the best of both worlds. Now, design-wise, I hope you weren't expecting anything new because Apple just doesn't do full redesigns year over year. It usually takes 2 years or sometimes 3 to do so. And since the iPhone 12 is such a radical departure from the iPhone 11, don't expect the iPhone 13 to make many changes. And that kind of makes this more of like a 12S release. And Apple may choose to just go with 12S because there's lots of superstitious feelings about 13 being an unlucky number. They kind of have to manage that in the marketing department at least. Personally, I love the look and feel of the iPhone 12 Pro with its slab sides and stainless steel construction, but let me know below in the comments, how are you feeling about using your iPhone 12? One major rumor that I keep seeing and keep hearing that kind of just comes from nowhere is that the iPhone 13 will have no ports. It will not have a charging port anymore, and Apple will go fully into MagSafe charging. Now, I really don't see this happening with the iPhone 13. MagSafe is problematic for many reasons, but the big one is that it doesn't do data transfer. It only handles charging. And right now, you still need to, in some cases, plug in your phone to a computer to transfer data. I know it's kind of a niche thing, but it's also used for resetting phones in dire circumstances when the phones won't boot up, and you really don't want to have to push people to go into an Apple store and use a special diagnostic port like on the Apple Watch, for example, to reset it when they have software troubles. There's also the problem that a MagSafe charger is just big and heavy and expensive to make compared to the pennies on the dollar that they can make lightning cables for. And when Apple just removed the charging brick from the iPhone 12's box to cut down on the price and reduce its environmental impact, which I applauded at the time actually, it doesn't make sense to swing back in the other direction and start including a big, heavy, expensive MagSafe charger in every single box all of a sudden. And as much as I dislike the Lightning port and wish that Apple would move to USB-C like it has on its computers and its iPads, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to make MagSafe the next level for that. But if it were to do this in maybe 3 or 4 generations, I could probably get on board. MagSafe may be up to a level of use across the world that you could make it the default charger for the iPhone. And then, only then, can you remove the port. Then there's the cameras. I'm expecting at a minimum that Apple will move to the iPhone 12 Pro's camera setup across the board. That means you may actually get a triple camera setup on the lower end iPhone 13, so you have the ultra wide and the telephoto camera. Now what I'd like to see, and what we'll at least see in the iPhone 13 Pro, is that Apple will use the 12 Pro Max's much larger main camera sensor in that 13 Pro. I really hope that it could bring it down to the 13 as well, but cost and space considerations may knock that out of the running. It was really disappointing in the iPhone 12 generation that the 12 Pro Max had such a different camera setup, and it was so much better than the iPhone 12 Pro that it really made that 12 Pro not that Pro. So in order to make that 13 Pro feel more like a premium device, it really needs to have Apple's top-end camera. So I want to hear from you. What do you think about all of these iPhone 13 rumors? There are a lot to choose from. Some of them contradict, some of them are never going to happen, but I like to speculate about what's coming in the next generation several months on down the road, and I'm sure you do too. Let me know in the comments so we can start that conversation.